what it's like to be a teacher.
Okay, well, we are here to talk about preserving architectural heritage, the National Register versus the National Trust. Most people, when they think of preservation and the National Trust and such, they think about preserving buildings and structures, but there's a lot more to it. Both the National Register and the National Trust encompass a wide variety of things, including natural settings, man-made settings. Some examples include Fleischer's Bridge in Newport, Pennsylvania. Over there we have Canyon de Chelly in Apache County, Arizona. Down here, continuing on, down here we have the Carrick Arid Rope Bridge in County Antrim, Northern Ireland, and the obelisk, better known as Cleopatra's Needle, in London, England. Just an example of some of the things that the two organizations encompass. And there will be a lot of pictures in this presentation, as well as a foreign language lesson at the end. Yeah, that'll intrigue you. This may look familiar. Of course, this is the placard right in front of our own beloved Ruthmere. And we're going to begin with the National Register of Historic Places in the United States. The register was officially formed on October 15th, 1966. It was administered by the National Park Service from 1966 to 1978, and originally consisted of 808 listings, all of them already registered with the National Historic Landmarks, which was a precursor to the National Register. Yeah. All 50 states, plus most of the territories and possessions, are represented in the register. And the register contains over 1.8 million individual buildings contained in historic districts such as the Beardsley Avenue Historic District, where we are right now. Oh. We're dead. Oh. There we go. Okay. In addition to that, there are 95,000 plus individual buildings listed that aren't part of a district. And I did want to list all 95,000, but I only have 20 minutes. So.
Thank you.
Now, certain government buildings, such as the U.S. Capitol or the White House, can be added to the National Register, but they are not actually administered by the register. They're administered by a variety of different organizations and groups in concert with each other. And they do have to have significant historical value. Something like the FBI building would not qualify because it's just too new. The National Register separated from the National Park Service in 1978, giving them a little bit more autonomy, more control over what they were able to list and how, because there are all different rules and regulations that apply. Now, some of the key administration in the early years included George B. Herzog Jr. He was the director of the National Park Service in 1966 when the National Register was put in place. William J. Murtaugh was the first official keeper of the register, who is the one who ultimately makes decisions on what buildings do or do not get listed. And finally, Cecil Andrus, Secretary of the Interior, who was the one responsible for separating the National Register from the National Park Service, thereby giving them that freedom. Now, in addition to buildings and houses, the National Register also takes in factories, battlefields, government and civic buildings, shipwrecks, barns, and churches, but not national parks such as Yellowstone or Grand Canyon. However, some natural landscapes, such as Luray Caverns in Virginia, do qualify. And I just put that in because it's one of my favorite childhood destinations. Now, at the time of its inception in 1966, the register took over control of, all right, we're dead again. National Historic Landmarks, and I did mean this type to be a lot bigger. including the Hindenburg crash site in Lakehurst, New Jersey. National historic sites such as the Salem Custom House in Salem, Massachusetts, which was actually the first National Historic Site listed in 1916. National historic parks such as Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, which was inhabited from the 9th to the 12th centuries AD. National military parks such as Shiloh National Park in Tennessee. National memorials such as General Grant Memorial, aka Grant's Tomb in New York City. And some national monuments such as the Devil's Tower in Crook County, Wyoming. The very first property ever listed on the National Register was the Old Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, officially added to the register on November 13th, 1966, just a little less than a month after the register itself was officially incorporated. All contenders for the register must meet at least one of four principal criteria for inclusion, designated as event, meaning that they must make a contribution to American history. Person, meaning that they must be associated with a significant historical figure. Design or construction, meaning they must have architecture with great artistic value or must be designed by a master architect such as Frank Lloyd Wright. The fourth category, information potential, meaning that they either contain or have the potential to contain evidence of prehistory. The properties are nominated by their respective state historic preservation officer, who then passes on their recommendations to the National Register, and it's the keeper of the register that makes that ultimate final decision and catalogs the property. Generally speaking, all properties listed must be at least 50 years old. There are some exceptions that can be made if a property makes an impact on recent events such as Ground Zero in New York City that is now officially listed. Cemeteries, statues, relocated structures, and reconstructed structures are generally not allowed, but there are exceptions, such as the Statue of Liberty, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so that over-qualifies. Listings, with the exception of government buildings, remain the property of the owner at the time of the listing. And despite common misconception, owners are allowed to make adjustments to the property as long as they remain within certain guidelines. A lot of people think, your house is registered, you're locked into what you can or can't do. That is not true. Small differences, such as painting shutters a different color, are acceptable as long as the chosen color is within the bounds of history. So, for instance, you wouldn't be allowed to paint your shutters neon orange unless that color existed at the time the house was built. For example, we would not be able to turn the Havilah Beardsley house into a bar with a neon flamingo in the window. I know, we want to. But generally speaking, listings are not for financial gain. They can bring some monetary incentives for restoration, but generally they are for prestige only. Each state has different rules overseen by the state register and not by the National Register. All the rules that regard the changes to the property are negotiable. There's nothing absolutely set in stone. And in fact, federal rules tend to be a little more flexible than state rules. So if you can get it past your state Board of Preservation, then chances are the National Trust or National Register will be happy to go along with it. Now here we have a sample of buildings that are listed in the National Register, and again, not in all 95,000. I had to be a little bit selective. But we do have Ruthmere, of course, right here in Elkhart. Falling Water in Bear Run, Pennsylvania, which is the Frank Lloyd Wright house, and one of my favorites, completed in 1935. Over there, Olana in Greenport, New York, constructed in 1872. The Empire State Building in New York City, completed in 1931. and Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina from 1895. Some of the structures that are listed in the National Register include the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri from 1965, the Cyclone roller coaster at Luna Park in Coney Island, New York from 1927, the Brooklyn Bridge constructed or completed in 1883, the New River Gorge Bridge in Fayette County, West Virginia from 1977, and Route 66, which runs from Chicago all the way out to Santa Monica, California, commissioned in 1926, decommissioned in 1985. And here we have one of the more historic segments featured in Williams, Arizona. The National Register will also encompass objects that are of historic significance, such as Plymouth Rock in Plymouth, Massachusetts, stamped 1620, of course, the year the Mayflower landed. The Statue of Liberty in New York City, constructed in 1886. The Liberty Bell in Philadelphia from 1752. The Delta Queen, a paddle wheel steamer, home base in New Orleans, Louisiana, that was constructed in 1926. And Hoover Dam, straddling the Colorado River between Nevada and Arizona, completed in 1936. Historic structures include Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland, completed in 1800. Mount Rushmore in Pennington County, South Dakota from 1941. The Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio, constructed circa 300 BC and renovated around AD 1400. The USS Arizona Memorial from 1962 in Honolulu, Hawaii. And the Antietam National Battlefield in Sharpsburg, Maryland, which was officially created in 1890. Now, Fort McHenry, Mount Rushmore, and Antietam are among those original 808 listings. And they also preserve spots of natural beauty, and it's not hard to see why. Some of the prime examples include Franconia Notch in New Hampshire, Hanging Lake in Garfield County, Colorado, the Malaspina Glacier in Yakutat, Alaska, the Chimney Rock in Merle County, Nebraska, and over there, Ghost Ranch in Abiquiu, New Mexico, which is the site of one of the world's largest and wealthiest dinosaur fossil beds, yielding more than 8,000 complete skeletons to date. With that, we're going to move on to the National Trust for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The National Trust was officially formed in 1895 by Octavia Hill, Robert Hunter, and Hardwick Rawnsley. The reigning monarch is always the president of the National Trust, so that, of course, now would be King Charles III. Uh-oh, now what? The National Trust holds over 374,000 listings, including 500,000 plus individual buildings. It currently boasts over 14,000 paid staff and 53,000 volunteers, so that's something we're aspiring to here. Properties are actually owned by the National Trust as opposed to the National Register, where the family continues to own their own property. The National Trust actually purchases the property from the family, or they're donated by the property owner. The National Trust for Scotland is separate but serves the same function. And for the convenience of this talk, they are being incorporated together. Now, funds for the National Trust are raised in pretty much the same way they are in the United States, through private donations. They get a cut from the National Lottery. They get some government grants, and a large portion of their funding comes from memberships. As of 2020, they had nearly 6 million members, including an American contingency known as the Royal Oak Society. And while these are the more traditional ways of raising money, sometimes a little more unconventional means are used. For example, In 1927, a poet by the name of Margaret Stewart Pollard formed Ferguson's Gang, a group of 5 society women who adopted rather comical monikers such as Bill Stickers and Red Biddy. And they would don masks and costumes and do crazy stunts in order to raise attention for the National Trust and raising funds. And among the crazy things they did would be delivering money to the National Trust offices inside a metal pineapple or rolled up in cigars. Unfortunately for them, the metallic pineapple caused a bomb scare at Parliament in 1939.
I wonder how many cigars were smoked.
That's a dreadful thought. Despite bomb threats and burning cigars, they did manage to raise huge sums of money over several decades. And on her deathbed, Pollard revealed that she was Bill Stickers. Things that the National Trust oversees include more than 200 historic houses, such as Wilder Hope Manor in Shropshire, England. I always just love that name, Wilder Hope. It sounds like it's right out of a Gothic romance novel. 41 castles and chapels, including Rosslyn Chapel in West Lothian, Scotland. 47 industrial monuments, such as Houghton Mill in Cambridgeshire, England. 9 lighthouses, including the Souter Lighthouse in Sunderland, Tyne and Wear, England. 56 entire villages, including Chiddingston in Kent, England. 39 public houses, or pubs, such as the Crown Bar in Belfast, County Antrim, Northern Ireland. There we go. And 25 medieval barns, such as the Great Coxwell Barn in Great Coxwell, Oxfordshire, England. As of 2020, the National Trust owned nearly 1,000 square miles of land and 780 miles of coastline, making it one of the largest landholders in the UK. And among their holdings is the Pass of Glencoe in the Scottish Highlands. Much of the land is still farmed by private citizens, and many of the houses are still lived in by the donating families who, as I said before, don't retain ownership, only stewardship. Listings range from sweeping landscapes, such as this anonymous field that I just happen to really like the picture of, to houses such as John Lennon's and Paul McCartney's childhood homes in Liverpool. No major changes, unlike with the National Register, no major changes may be made to a place without specific permission from the National Trust. And their rules and guidelines are much stricter than they are in the United States. In 1907, Parliament passed the first National Trust Act, meaning that holdings cannot be sold without parliamentary approval. They are serious when they talk about preservation. The very first listing was in 1895 at 5 acres of cliff top at a place known as Dinas Ochlu in Cardigan, Wales. Dinas Ochlu means Citadel of Light in Welsh. The land was donated by a Mrs. Fanny Talbot in memory of her husband. I was unable to find out his first name, though. And shown in the photograph here, Rhaeadrdu Falls is located near the top of the property away from the cliffs. The very first building listed in the National Trust was the Alfriston Clergy House, constructed in the 15th century in East Sussex, England, and that was added to the register in 1896. It was purchased for $10 and restored for $350, which back then was still huge money. Pardon me? Pounds, yeah, thank you. I have the pound symbol and I still got it wrong. In 1907, Barrington Court in Somerset, England, constructed in the 1550s, became the first country house added to the National Trust. At the time of purchase, it was dilapidated and completely void of furnishings or any decoration. They did restore it. It is open to the public today, but it's still devoid of furnishings and such, but at least you can get in and tour the building. And this one proved to be a rather painful lesson in the need for planned endowments, as when they purchased it and set about restoring it, the National Trust had to rely entirely on what they had in their own coffers at the time, and it nearly bankrupted them. So after that, they learned how to do what Bill does, go out looking for money. As I mentioned, they do own 56 entire villages. The first was West Wickham in Buckinghamshire, donated in 1934 by the Royal Society of Arts. Now, in a place like this, again, the National Trust owns the houses. The residents pay a nominal rent and also receive financial incentives to help maintain the property. In 1936, they created the Country House Scheme. That was intended to purchase mansions and great houses from owners who could no longer maintain the property. The very first one purchased, houses had to offer at least some limited public access, even if that was just to the gardens. The very first house added Stourhead in Wiltshire, England, in a little village with a charming name of Stourhead with Gasper. And this house was built in 1724, destroyed by fire in 1902, and rebuilt in 1906, 36 years before the National Trust gained it, so at least they didn't have to bear the expense for those repairs. Among the buildings listed, one of my absolute favorite houses, Compton Winyates in Upper Tysoe, Warwickshire, England, constructed circa 1481, and still one of the most perfectly preserved Elizabethan houses in the British Isles. Mendips, as it's known, John Lennon's childhood home, constructed in 1933 in Liverpool, and that was actually bought by Yoko Ono and donated by her to the National Trust. In the middle here, we have the Palace of Westminster, better known as the Houses of Parliament, constructed between 1016 and 1860. Culzean Castle in Oban, Argyllshire, Scotland from 1792. And for any friends out there of the TV show Monarch of the Glen, Avariki House in Kinloch Lagan, Inverness-shire, Scotland from 1844. Objects included in the National Trust include the Menai Bridge over the Menai Strait in Anglesey, Wales, completed in 1826. St. Michael's Tower on Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England from the 14th century. And for scholars of Arthurian literature, Glastonbury Tor is largely believed to be the location of King Arthur's Camelot. In the middle here we have the Brighton Pleasure Pier in Brighton, Sussex, England, constructed in 1899, which is basically an amusement park on stilts over the English Channel. The Forth Railroad Bridge in Queens Ferry, West Lothian, Scotland, completed in 1889. And I love this picture because it just shows how enormous that bridge actually is. The towers are over 360 feet tall, and the overall length of the bridge, including its end spans, is more than 8,000 feet. And down there in the lower left-hand corner, Kew Gardens in London, England, officially opened to the public in 1759. Historic sites owned by the National Trust include the Uffington White Horse in Oxfordshire, England, constructed between 1380 and 550 BC. The Strand Lane Roman Baths in London, constructed in 1612, which means they're not actually Roman, but when they were discovered, they were believed to be Roman until it was discovered that it was actually the cistern for a 17th century mansion that has long since disappeared. In the middle, of course, we have Stonehenge in Salisbury Plain, Wiltshire, England, constructed between 3100 and 1600 BC. The Culloden Battlefield in Inverness, Scotland, commemorating the Battle of 1746, and Hadrian's Wall in Northumberland, England, which was begun in AD 122. And that was intended to fend off attacks from the Scots. Some of the natural resources include the Falls of Glomach in Ross-shire, Scotland, Windermere Lake in the Lake District of England, Zenner Head in Cornwall, England. Down there we have the famous White Cliffs of Dover in Kent, England. and the mysterious Giant's Causeway, County Anne from Northern Ireland. And now we come to something that is not on the National Trust list, but I think should be. Wait for it. Here we have the train station from 1848 in the town of Llanfairpwll, Gwyngyl, Gogerach, Wyrndrobil, Llantysilio, Gogogoch. I have proof. There is a rough translation of the pronunciation. The name of the town means church or clan of St. Mary, Ver, by the pool, Pwyll, of the white hazels, Gwyngyl, near to, Goger, the fierce whirlpool, Ichrun Wodrobwyll, by the church, clan of St. Tysil, Tysilio, of the red cave, Gogogoch. It is the longest place name in Europe, consisting of 58 letters in English, 51 in Cymraeg, which is the Welsh name for Welsh. The name was coined in 1869 when two villages combined in order to claim the longest name on the British railway system, a publicity stunt that worked. I've been there. In fact, the village receives more than 200,000 visitors per year, which is enormous given the fact that the live-in population is only 3,100. And with that, it is time for questions in the house.